The commander could barely sit on his horse. His body was weakened by illness. Yet Umar ibn al-Khattab had chosen him to face one of the most powerful armies on earth. Across the plains of Iraq stood the Persian Empire backed by war elephants, seasoned generals, and centuries of military power. Many believed the Muslims were marching toward disaster, but no one could imagine how that battle would end, or how one companion of the Prophet, Sa'd ibn Abi Waqqas, would help change the history of Iraq, Persia, and the Muslim world forever. Before we begin, tell us in the comments, what do you think was the greatest challenge facing Sa'd ibn Abi Waqqas before the Battle of Qadisiyyah? And if you enjoy cinematic stories from Islamic history, support Islamic conquest by liking the video, sharing it with others, and subscribing for more forgotten stories from the past. Long before the great battles of Iraq, Sa'd ibn Abi Waqqas had already earned a reputation that echoed throughout Arabia. He was among the earliest people to embrace Islam. Still a young man, only 17 years old, when he accepted the message of Muhammad. Those were dangerous days. The small Muslim community in Makkah lived under constant pressure. Public worship could invite ridicule, abuse, or worse. Many believers prayed in secret, gathering in isolated valleys and hidden places beyond the sight of Quraysh. On one such occasion, Saad and a group of Muslims were worshiping quietly when several young men from Quraysh stumbled upon them. The visitors did not come with respect. They mocked the believers, laughed at them, treated their devotion as something worthy of ridicule. Saad watched in silence for a moment. Then something inside him stirred. Nearby lay the bone of a camel. He picked it up and hurled it toward the men. It struck one of them and drew blood. The mockers fled. The incident was small compared to the great events that would follow. Yet it revealed something important about Saad. His faith was not fragile. And when the honor of Islam was challenged, he was not a man who stood by silently. Years passed. The small group of believers grew. Trials became battles. And Saad became one of the most trusted warriors of Islam. At Uhud, when the Muslim army faced one of its most difficult moments, Saad stood firm with bow in hand. His arrows flew with remarkable precision. The Prophet watched him and spoke words that very few people would ever hear. "Keep shooting, Saad. May my father and mother be sacrificed for you." Those words remained one of the greatest honors bestowed upon any companion. But Saad possessed something even more powerful than skill with a bow. He possessed sincerity. The Prophet prayed for him, asking Allah to make his supplications accepted. And over time, people began to witness the effects of that prayer. His arrows struck their targets. His words carried weight. And his prayers became known throughout the Muslim community. Yet Saad never relied on reputation. He feared Allah deeply. Those who knew him described a man who wept when listening to the Quran, a man who carefully avoided doubtful wealth, a man who understood that victory did not come from strength alone. It came from obedience to Allah. That understanding would soon be tested on a scale few could imagine. Years later, the Muslim armies entered Iraq. There they encountered fierce resistance from Persian forces. The fighting was brutal. Wave after wave of enemy soldiers crashed against Muslim lines. Thousands of Muslims were martyred. When the reports reached Medina, Umar ibn al-Khattab was deeply troubled. The losses weighed heavily upon him. For a moment, he considered leading the campaign personally. He prepared to leave Medina and take command of the army himself. But the senior companions saw the danger in that decision. If Umar left the center of the Muslim state, who would oversee the affairs of the growing Islamic world? After careful consultation, a different path was chosen. Umar would remain in Medina. A commander would be appointed, someone capable, experienced, trusted. The companions considered the matter carefully. Then one name emerged: Sa'd ibn Abi Waqqas. The choice was met with approval. He was brave in battle, wise in judgment, respected by the army, and above all, he possessed unwavering faith. Soon, Umar entrusted him with one of the most important military commands in Islamic history. The mission before him was immense. Persia was no ordinary enemy. For centuries, it had stood among the world's great powers. Its armies were disciplined, its resources vast, its commanders experienced. Most importantly, it was determined not to lose Iraq. As preparations continued, Umar sent instructions to Saad. The letters carried more than military advice. They carried reminders about humility, about sincerity, about the true purpose of the struggle. Umar warned him never to become proud because of his status as a companion of the Prophet. Honor, he reminded him, came only through obedience to Allah, not through lineage, not through titles, not through past achievements. Saad understood. The responsibility resting upon his shoulders was larger than any personal ambition. Ahead lay Qadisiyyah, a place that would soon become one of the most decisive battlefields in Islamic history. As the Muslim army advanced, reports began arriving from scouts. The Persians were gathering in extraordinary numbers. Their famous commander Rustam had taken charge personally. War elephants accompanied the army. Thousands upon thousands of soldiers filled the landscape. The closer the Muslims came, the clearer the reality became. This would not be a simple campaign. This would be a struggle that could determine the future of the entire region. Before fighting began, Umar instructed Saad to send a delegation to the Persian court. The purpose was clear. The Muslims would invite before they fought. A group of representatives traveled to meet the Persian ruler. They entered the royal court carrying neither fear nor arrogance, only confidence. They explained their mission. Allah had sent them to call people from the worship of creation to the worship of the Creator, from injustice to justice, from oppression to freedom under the guidance of Islam. If the invitation was accepted, there would be peace. If it was rejected, conflict would follow. The Persian ruler listened, but his pride was wounded by their words. The thought that a rising power from Arabia could challenge Persia's authority seemed unthinkable. As the meeting ended, he ordered soil from Persian land to be brought forward. In an act meant to insult the delegation, he had the dirt placed upon them. The Muslims viewed the incident differently. When the delegation returned and informed Saad what had happened, they saw it as a sign. The ruler of Persia had symbolically handed over the soil of his land. What was intended as humiliation became, in their eyes, a reminder that all affairs belong to Allah. But another problem now weighed heavily on Saad's mind, a painful one. As the armies prepared for battle, he fell seriously ill. Pain spread through his body. Movement became difficult. Even sitting comfortably was a challenge. Riding a horse was nearly impossible. The commander chosen to lead one of the greatest battles in Islamic history could barely move. The timing could not have been worse. For a moment, the reality of his condition pressed heavily upon him. Then he remembered something. The Prophet had discouraged believers from dwelling on if only. What had happened was Allah's decree. His duty was not to regret. His duty was to act. Gathering his strength, Saad addressed the army. His words reignited their determination. The soldiers listened carefully. Many of them understood the gravity of the coming battle. Some would not survive the days ahead. Others would witness events that future generations would struggle to imagine. The atmosphere changed. Reciters read verses from the Quran. Scholars reminded the soldiers of their purpose. Rows were formed. Weapons were checked. Prayers filled the air. Across the field, the Persian army prepared as well. And then came the sight that immediately captured everyone's attention. The war elephants, massive, armored, towering above men and horses. Many Muslim horses had never encountered such creatures before. Some panicked. Others refused to advance. The danger was obvious. If the elephants broke the Muslim formations, the consequences could be devastating. Saad watched from his elevated position. Unable to fight in person, unable to charge with the men, unable even to mount a horse. Yet every decision now depended on him. Every order, every adjustment, every response. The fate of the battle rested on the judgment of a commander battling pain, while facing one of the strongest armies on earth. And as the first great clash at Qadisiyyah began to unfold, that judgment was about to be tested like never before. The first day of Qadisiyyah ended with neither side willing to yield. The battlefield was littered with the fallen. Wounded men were carried back to camp. The dead were buried. And throughout the night, both armies prepared for another day of fighting. Yet one question continued to haunt the Muslim ranks. How could they defeat the war elephants? The giant animals had become the centerpiece of the Persian strategy. Wherever they advanced, horses panicked and formations weakened. Everyone understood that unless the elephants were stopped, victory would remain uncertain. At dawn, the battle resumed. The sun rose over a landscape already scarred by war. Dust drifted across the plain. The sounds of prayer were replaced by the sounds of steel. And once again, the armies moved toward one another. That morning, reinforcements arrived for the Muslims under the command of Hashim ibn Utbah. Among them was one of the most respected warriors in the army, al-Kaka ibn Amr. His arrival lifted morale immediately. The men greeted him with relief, not because they believed one man could win a war, but because experienced leadership often makes the difference between panic and perseverance. As fighting intensified, single combat erupted across the battlefield. Warriors from both sides stepped forward. Some returned. Others never left the field alive. The hours passed. The casualties mounted. Still, no decisive breakthrough came. Then the Muslim commanders began focusing their efforts on the elephants themselves. Arrows rained down upon the riders positioned atop the massive animals. Skilled warriors moved closer, risking their lives to strike at vulnerable points. The task was dangerous. One mistake could mean being crushed beneath thousands of pounds of charging force. But slowly, the strategy began to work. Several elephants became confused. Others lost control. And when some of the largest animals turned and fled, they crashed directly into Persian formations. What followed shocked even seasoned soldiers. The same creatures meant to secure Persian victory now spread confusion among their own ranks. Yet despite these successes, the battle remained undecided. The Persians still possessed enormous numbers. Their commander, Rustam, refused to retreat. The struggle entered another day. And then another. Men fought under a relentless sun. They slept little. They ate little. Exhaustion settled over the battlefield like a heavy blanket. For many soldiers, time itself seemed to disappear. There was only fighting, survival, and faith. Among those watching the battle unfold was a man who desperately wanted to join it. His name was Abu Mijan, a brave horseman, a talented warrior, yet he was unable to fight. Because of a previous offense, he had been restrained and kept away from the battlefield. From where he sat, he could hear the clash of armies. He could hear the cries of men risking everything, and he could do nothing. The frustration became unbearable. Finally, he approached Salma, the wife of Sa'd ibn Abi Waqqas. With deep emotion, he pleaded for a chance to fight. He promised that if he survived, he would willingly return to his confinement afterward. At first, she refused. But Abu Mijan continued. His words reflected the anguish of a warrior forced to watch others defend the Muslim army, while he remained behind. Eventually, Salma was moved by his sincerity. She released him. Abu Mijan mounted Sa'd's horse and rode toward the battlefield. What happened next left many astonished. He charged into the fighting with extraordinary courage. Again and again, he struck at enemy positions. Again and again, he returned to the thickest part of the battle. From his elevated position, Saad watched the mysterious rider. The warrior's movements seemed strangely familiar. His bravery, his style, the way he maneuvered through enemy lines, something about it reminded him of Abu Mijan. When the truth became known, Saad was deeply moved. A man who had honored his promise even in the midst of war deserved respect. Abu Mijan returned exactly as he had pledged, and Saad granted him his freedom. It was a moment that revealed something remarkable about both men. One showed courage, the other showed mercy. Meanwhile, the battle approached its final and most decisive stage. Al-Kaka ibn Amr introduced a clever strategy. Groups of horsemen rode away during the night. Then, at intervals, they returned to the battlefield shouting the takbir. To the Persians, it appeared as though fresh reinforcements were arriving continuously. The psychological effect was powerful. Uncertainty began spreading through Persian ranks. Questions replaced confidence, doubt replaced certainty, and for the first time, the momentum began to shift. Still, Rustam stood firm. The veteran Persian commander understood what was at stake. If Qadisiyyah was lost, the road into the heart of Persia would be exposed. So he continued directing his forces, continued resisting, continued fighting. But the pressure was growing. Eventually, a group of Muslim cavalrymen pushed toward Rustam's position. The fighting around him intensified. The Persian commander attempted to escape. He abandoned his place and fled toward the nearby water. Muslim soldiers pursued relentlessly. Moments later, Rustam was killed. The news spread across the battlefield with astonishing speed. Rustam was dead. The commander of the Persian army had fallen, and with him, much of Persia's will to continue the fight. What happened next changed everything. Persian formations began to break. Order gave way to confusion. Confusion became panic, and panic became retreat. The Muslims pressed forward. The battlefield that had seemed impossible to win only days earlier now belonged to them. Qadisiyyah was over. The great empire that had intimidated nations for centuries had suffered one of the most devastating defeats in its history. For the Muslims, the victory carried enormous significance. Yet Sa'd ibn Abi Waqqas understood something important. The campaign was not finished. Qadisiyyah had opened a door. What lay beyond it would determine the future of the region. Soon afterward, Muslim forces advanced toward al-Madain, the imperial capital. But another challenge awaited them. Between the Muslim army and the city flowed the mighty Tigris River. The Persians had destroyed the bridges. They believed the river would stop the advance. It seemed like a reasonable assumption. Crossing such waters while facing an enemy on the opposite bank was a dangerous undertaking. Many commanders would have hesitated. Saad did not. After careful planning, he organized his forces and placed his trust in Allah. The order was given. The horses entered the river, one by one, then hundreds, then thousands. The scene was unforgettable. Men crossed the rushing waters while remembering Allah. They spoke calmly to one another, as though traveling across open land. Veterans later recalled the extraordinary confidence that filled the ranks. Salman al-Farisi was among those present. He reminded the men that Allah's help was greater than any obstacle before them. And remarkably, the crossing succeeded. The Muslim army reached the opposite shore. The Persians were stunned. Many could scarcely believe what they were witnessing. Soon afterward, al-Madain fell. The Persian ruler had already fled. The imperial capital passed into Muslim control. The campaign that had once seemed impossible was becoming reality. The unresolved tension that had hung over the story from the very beginning was finally answered. The sick commander who could barely sit on a horse had defeated one of the greatest military powers on earth. Not through personal strength, not through overwhelming numbers, but through faith, leadership, patience, and trust in Allah. In the years that followed, Saad governed Iraq and helped establish stability throughout the region. He supervised the founding of Kufa, which would become one of the most important cities in Islamic history. His reputation for justice and sincerity remained intact. Yet despite his achievements, he never sought power for its own sake. As civil conflicts later emerged among Muslims, Saad chose to stay away from bloodshed. He could not bear the thought of Muslims fighting one another. He preferred reflection over division, peace over rivalry. Years passed. The great battles became memories. The commander who had witnessed the rise of Islam from its earliest days entered old age. Eventually, in the year 54 AH, as he approached the end of his life, death came peacefully. His son later recalled sitting beside him during his final moments. Seeing his father's condition, he began to weep. Saad comforted him. He reminded him of something he had carried in his heart for decades. The Prophet had given him glad tidings of paradise. He trusted the promise of Allah, and he faced death with calm certainty. Then he requested something unusual. A garment from the Battle of Badr had been carefully preserved throughout his life. He asked that it be used as part of his shroud. It was a final reminder of the journey he had traveled. From the hidden gatherings of Makkah to the fields of Badr and Uhud, to the victory at Qadisiyyah, to the banks of the Tigris. A life spent in service to Islam. A life marked by courage, sincerity, sacrifice, and faith. Sa'd ibn Abi Waqqas was among the last of the great companions to leave this world. He was buried in Jannat al-Baqi. May Allah be pleased with him. And may we learn from his steadfastness, his humility, and his unwavering trust in Allah. If this story benefited you, please like, comment, and share it with others. And subscribe to Islamic Conquest for more journeys through the lives of the great men and women of Islamic history.